I'm here today with my really good friend Dan Gittleman. Dan, you and I have been working together for many years. You doing the heavy lifting, me kind of the trusted eyes advisor in the background. But I've watched with huge admiration as you have been a serial entrepreneur. I'd love you to tell a little bit the background of Storage Apps, your previous company, and then we'll talk a little bit later about what you're doing today.
Great. Yeah, with Storage Apps, it was a company I literally started while I was in college, and it was out of a garage. I realized we lived in an area that was rich in pharmaceutical companies and financial companies, so if I created a product that I could just service in that one small area.
And you started this in New Jersey, right?
In New Jersey.
Yeah.
And so if I started this thing, I could service it with very, very few people. And so we started reselling products from other companies.
So this is a technology company, and what was the product?
So the product was RAID drives. So basically, it was just redundant storage that was incredibly secure, but more importantly, very, very fail-safe. Yeah. So for pharmaceuticals and financials, it was huge. Quickly realized that I was just going to follow around EMC to their customers.
So this is the client-server era, and storage was getting pervasive, and you had a solution with these array servers, which would allow a large amount of storage of secured data, right?
Yes, and it was all about disintermediation, because I realized that storage was getting very, very cheap, but companies like at that point it was Storage Tech, EMC, Data General, were charging incredible amounts for this storage. So what we did is we just hired, literally it was probably 5 of us at one point doing tens of millions of dollars in business, and we would follow EMC sales guys around, and we would OEM products from Data General, other companies that we even competed with, and we wrote a thin little layer of software that would monitor these, that if anything failed, we would literally send a college student in with night with replaceable parts. And so we could very, very cheaply create a service area in a very dense geographic area. So we really concentrated on the financial sector selling this storage. After a while, Morgan Stanley, Lehman, Merrill Lynch, we were providing almost all of their storage and really beating all of the big guys at the game. Within a few years, sales were probably close to $100 million doing this with very, very few people. Then along the course, we realized that to give some of these features of some of these massive companies out there, we wrote a little abstraction layer, virtualization layer, that made whatever type of storage you have, basically, it didn't matter, that you could provide these features through our software layer. And then essentially that is what we ended up selling to Hewlett-Packard in 2001 for over $300 million.
So let's step back to the beginning. You came out of college, and did you know much about technology at that point?
Yeah, no, I grew up knowing a lot about technology.
Yeah. And were you largely self-taught, or did you get it through school? Or
largely self-taught.
Yeah.
Because at the point that I grew up, there really wasn't, the teachers weren't up to speed on most of this
and there were
technology.
so many people like you. I know in my era in Silicon Valley, some of the smartest engineers were basically self-taught because they didn't teach in universities at that time all the things you wanted to know how to do if you're going to take advantage of the microprocessors, personal computers, client-server world, the early days of the internet. So many of the most successful people have been ones who had the curiosity to go out and learn on their own.
Absolutely. And then the key to this thing was finding out, what parts of the market were still getting high prices or customers were paying high prices, but technology was driving down the underlying core technology of this.
So one of the things we've always known about technology is that technology continues to get less expensive over time, but big companies don't often make the real leap to a disruptive price, which means often not just changing the technology, but changing the way you distribute it, changing the way you sell it, changing the way you market it, what your infrastructure costs are, how you partner with other companies to do things that you don't necessarily want to have to build the infrastructure yourself. How did you learn how to do those types of things when you were just coming out of college?
A lot of it luck, a lot of it trial and error. But I realized that I saw, actually it was an ad in a magazine. The internet really wasn't big or popular at that point. It was just starting out. And I saw an ad for a RAID controller. It was actually made by some guy who lived in a pig farm in Virginia. And so I OEM'd that product, and I talked to him about, who makes the enclosures to put the hard drives in to make this redundant infrastructure. And I realized the whole key to this thing was to create a service model that you could have just people without huge education in this market or whatever that could go in and just hot swap any one of these pieces. And so we built that product around that, and literally within a few months, we had a product that was comparable to what probably EMC spent, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars developing. The interesting thing about that market was hard drive prices were falling so quickly that literally at the beginning of every year our margins would probably be 5 or 6%, and then we'd be about 80% by the end of the year. And these large companies would only ever ask us for price reductions maybe once a year, if that at all. So the margins and what we were doing between memory dropping and the hard drives were just literally staggering. And our big competitors, we'd always let them go in there first, we'd let them set the price, and we'd go in just a little bit cheaper, but with an incredible service model. I mean, that was the key. In 9 years at that company, we never had one customer lose one drop of data.